should all be proud of as a nation. And that is, over the last many years, we have made some real progress in fighting bigotry in our country, and that is no small thing. You know, I am old enough to remember that in parts of this country, you know, black people couldn't drink at a water fountain or go to a local school. So we have made progress in becoming a less racist society, and that is no small thing. We have made significant progress in becoming a less sexist society than we used to be.
Yes, we have!
That's right, we have. And that is, we thank the women. I can remember when I was mayor of Burlington, Vermont, not Burlington, Iowa, Burlington, Vermont, there were no police officers in the city who were women. I mean, just as one example, women were not going to medical school then, and so forth. And there's really been a transformation in the understanding of the role that women can and do play in our society. And we should be proud of that. That is no small thing. And we are much less of a homophobic society than we used to be. And I think most people now recognize that people have a right to live out their sexuality and love the people that they choose to love. And clearly our goal must be to be a nation in which all people, regardless of the color of their skin, their religion, their country of origin, or their sexual orientation, can have equal opportunity. And I think we are making some progress in that direction. But what I really want to focus on this evening is to tell you about one area where not only have we not gone forward, we have actually fallen backwards, way back. And that is the economic condition facing the working families of our country and the class warfare that has been waged against them. Now, you're not going to hear too many people use that expression, but I do. And I think it's time we got our hands around that issue and our minds around that issue and understand what's going on, and that in many respects there has been a war being waged against the working class of this country for a very long time.
You go, Bernie.
Here is the bottom line. And it's a issue that is not talked about in Congress very much, I got to tell you, and not talked about in the corporate media. And that is that for the last 50 years, we have had an economy and a political system that has been working just great for the people who own the system, the top 1%. And here is the reality. You're not going to see it on TV tonight. The reality is that the status quo of today is exactly what the big money interests want to maintain, because they have never, ever, this is true, ever had it so good in the history of this country. Today we have an economy in which the very, very wealthy, people who are billionaires, are getting much richer, while 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. You all know what I'm talking about, paycheck to paycheck? All right, I grew up in a family, lived paycheck to paycheck. Lived in a rent-controlled apartment. Many of you grew up and are living paycheck to paycheck. And you understand that at the end of the month, after working hard, there ain't nothing that you are saving. You can't afford to take a vacation. Can't afford to take your wife, your husband out for dinner. Can't afford to pay for child care. Kid gets sick, you may not be able to afford to go to a doctor. So we have today, and let me say it clearly, we have more income and wealth inequality right now, at this moment, than any time in the history of the United States. Further, not only that, we have more concentration of ownership than at any time in the history of America. You know what that means? It means that in sector after sector, whether it's agriculture, whether it's financial services, whether it's media, whether it's the airline industry, you got fewer and fewer large, giant corporations controlling what goes on in that sector, able to control prices, control production. Today, we have more corporate greed than any time in American history. We have company after company making record-breaking profits as they raise their prices to outrageous levels. Worried about what you're paying in the supermarket and the grocery store? Take a look at the profit margins of the companies in the food industry. Worried about the price of gas? Take a look at ExxonMobil and how they are doing. In sector after sector, these guys are making record-breaking profits and charging us outrageously high prices. And when we talk about class warfare and corporate greed, I think you got an issue here with the Case New Holland Company, right here in Racine. Is that right?
Yeah.
So let me say a few words about Case as an example. As an example of what corporate greed is about, and it's important that we understand this. We are talking about a company not going bankrupt. In fact, they made a record-breaking profit of more than $2.3 billion last year. Not too bad. We're talking about a company that is spending $1 billion not to improve working conditions in Wisconsin or Iowa, but on stock buybacks to make their executives and stockholders even richer. We're talking about a company whose outgoing CEO, a gentleman named Scott Wine, is receiving a $10 million golden parachute after making $84 million in compensation over the past 3 years. We are talking about a company that, after making massive profits, is now laying off some 220 workers in Racine as it plans to ship jobs to Mexico, where they can pay workers starvation wages. That is the definition of corporate greed. This is not a company that's struggling. Company making huge profits, but they want more, and more, and that is precisely what corporate America is doing all over this country. Today, when we talk about the nature of our economy, it's important to take a deep breath and realize what is going on. Today in America, 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. You got that? 160 million people have less wealth than 3 people. That is not what this country is supposed to be about. And we've got to change that. Today in America, the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 90%. Today in America, you got about 800 billionaires who have nearly doubled their wealth since the passage of the Trump tax breaks for the wealthy. And these 800 people have become almost $3 trillion richer. Today in America, CEOs of major corporations make 350 times more than their average workers. So stop and think about it. Do these CEOs need more health care than their workers? Do they need more food? Do they need more housing? What you're talking about is unprecedented level of greed. It is this belief that I'm a CEO, I'm very wealthy, I can have it all. I can shut down plants, throw workers out on the street, move to Mexico, and give myself a huge bonus, a golden parachute, and to hell with the people down below. And this is the mentality that we have got to change if we're going to save this country and the economy for workers. And you know, there are a lot of angry people, and people say, you know, why are people in America so angry? I'll tell you why they're angry. And you don't see this on TV, and you're surely not hearing it much in the Congress. And that is, the average worker in America today makes almost $50 a week less than he or she did over 50 years ago after adjusting for inflation. despite huge increases in worker productivity. All right, let's stop and think about that. 50 years come and gone. Revolution in technology. Every worker in America now produces far, far, far more than used to be the case. And yet, that worker, that man or woman, is making $50 a week less in inflation-adjusted income. And that is a disgrace. That is why people are angry, and that is why people have every right to be angry. There was a study done a while ago by the Rand Corporation, which is a pretty conservative group, and what they estimated, and this is really incredible as well, that over the last 50 years, there has been an almost $50 trillion transfer of wealth, redistribution of wealth from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. So, you know, a lot of the guys on top, they say, oh, people like Bernie Sanders, they talk about redistributing wealth. Well, you're damn right, I do. But the truth is, there has been a redistribution, but it's gone in the wrong way. It's gone from working families to the top 1%. And just take a look at what's going on in the economy today. You got people, I don't know if anybody here, who have credit cards. You know what half of the credit cards are right now on all new credit cards? What half of the interest rates are? Yep. 24%. All right? That's Wall Street making a fortune. Talk about our healthcare system. How's it doing? It's a broken and dysfunctional healthcare system. The good news is that if you are a major stockholder in the insurance companies or the drug companies, you're doing phenomenally well. They're making money hand over fist. But if you're an average American, you can't afford health care. And maybe you're one of the 85 million Americans who are uninsured or underinsured. Now, I want to say a word about health care. So I'm chairman of the committee that deals with this stuff. It's not just that we spend twice as much per capita on health care as the people of any other nation. You got that? Twice. We're spending over $13,000 for every man, woman, and child. In Canada, which somehow manages to provide health care to all their people, they're spending half as much. But despite spending all of that money, our health care outcomes are not good. And there's one issue that we don't talk about enough, and that is life expectancy. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Here is the reality. The reality is, despite spending so much money on health care, we live significantly shorter lives than the people of other countries. Do you all know that? And then, on top of that, what we don't talk about, and this is really obscene. It is obscene. If you are rich in America, you will live as long as the people in Europe do, on average. If you're working class or poor, your life expectancy can be 10, 15 years lower than the people on top. All right? Think about that for a moment. In other words, the stress of being in the working class today, or being poor, leads to physical deterioration and a host of diseases, as well as mental health issues. So we need to radically change our healthcare system. In my view, and I think in the view of most Americans, healthcare must be considered a human right, not a privilege. And I want you just to think what it will mean to this country when, if you're sick or your mom's sick or your kids are sick, you can take them to the doctor, any doctor you want, without having to worry about the cost. You want to hear about obscenity? Obscenity is people dealing with cancer, dealing with terrible illnesses who have to go to the hospital. And they can't even concentrate on getting well. You know what they're worried about? Is their family going to go bankrupt or they get a $200,000 bill from the hospital? Can you imagine that? 500,000 families in America face bankruptcy because they committed the crime of getting sick. How disgraceful is that? So our job when we look to the future is to say that, yes, we're going to take on the greed of the insurance companies. We're not going to continue to pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Yes, we're going to guarantee health care to every man, woman, and child as a human right, not a privilege. So we've got a lot of problems facing the country. But here is the good news, and I really see it is enormously good news, and that is the trade union movement, and thank you, trade unionists, is revitalized, it's rejuvenated, it is growing. And if we're going to make progress in transforming this country, let me tell you, it's going to be the trade union movement leading the way. And I say that not just because of it here at the UAW Hall. I say that because we are taking on the greed and the unlimited money of a billionaire class. And there is no other entity in this country that has the capability, the strength, the numbers to take on the billionaire class other than the trade union movement. So it's imperative that we grow that movement, we stand with that movement, we get more workers into that movement, and we see the gains that the trade union movement can bring us. And what we have seen is that over the last couple of years, something really interesting is happening. We're seeing not just blue-collar workers joining unions, we're seeing white-collar workers, we're seeing those in between. In my own city of Burlington, for example, we had resident doctors at the local hospital formed a union for better wages and working conditions. We're seeing graduate students at universities forming unions and winning strong victories. And we're seeing young people at Starbucks and Amazon taking on some of the wealthiest, the most powerful people in this country. My committee held a hearing last year with Howard Schultz, who was then the head of Starbucks. And Starbucks was breaking the law every day, trying to make it hard for workers to form unions. But we just got news that actually they may be working right now on the SEIU and Starbucks on a national contract for Starbucks workers. That's a big deal. And I think all of us understand, we understand why it is important for workers to join a union, and that is nobody can do it alone. You can't do it alone. You can go to your boss and that's fine, maybe he or she is nice or not nice, but at the end of the day you got to stand together in solidarity and negotiate a decent contract. And that's what unions do. And there is a reason why union workers earn significantly higher wages, have better benefits than non-union workers. And that is they have stood together and fought for dignity and security. But it is not just the economic struggle that we must engage in. As important as that is, we have also got to engage in the political struggle as well. And we need to support candidates who support working people. That's not hard to understand. When Donald Trump was president, he appointed vehemently anti-union officials at the Labor Department. Meanwhile, President Biden became the first president in American history to walk a picket line in support of striking UAW workers. President Biden is implementing a strong Buy American policy. We need to produce our products here and have the government buy them here. We are beginning to make some progress in rebuilding our manufacturing base. All of you know that as a result of disastrous trade policies, NAFTA, PNTR with China, we lost thousands of factories, millions of good-paying jobs. We're beginning to rebuild our manufacturing base. We have created many good jobs, union jobs, by making the largest investment in American history in rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our wastewater plants, our water systems. And for the veterans out there, and I'm a member of the Veterans Committee, we have passed the PACT Act, which will provide significantly increased benefits and health care to our veterans. What the PACT Act was about is it says that if you were in an environment from Vietnam to Afghanistan to Iraq, where you were exposed to toxins in the air and you got sick, you're going to get the health care you need and get increased benefits. It's a big deal for many, many thousands of our veterans. And I think the contrast is clear with what our friends in the Republican Party want. They want, and they advertise it, they want more tax breaks for billionaires. Well, I think when you have massive income and wealth inequality, the last thing you want to do is give a tax break to billionaires. And you got Republicans all over the House and the Senate who want to cut Social Security, they want to cut Medicare, and they want to cut Medicaid as well. They want to privatize the VA. We're dealing with this every day. And they want to privatize the U.S. Postal Service. They want to throw tens of millions of people off of the health care they have now by eliminating the Affordable Care Act. They want to make it harder for workers to join unions. All right, that is some of what our Republican friends in Washington stand for. All right, that is their vision. It's a vision dominated and paid for by wealthy corporate interests. It is important that we have our vision. All right, we have to struggle day to day. Unions sit down and they negotiate the best contracts they can. But we have to do even more than that. We got to think about what kind of world do we want for our kids, for our parents, for future generations. What is our vision? And I think most importantly, in the richest country in the history of the world, we need a government that works for all of us, not just the few.
Right.
What does that mean? It means that at a time when millions of workers want to join unions but are unable to do so because the companies they work for are putting them into captive audience meetings, are intimidating them, are threatening them, are firing union organizers at the plant, what we need to do is pass the PRO Act, which gives workers the right to form a union without intimidation from the companies. Right now, all over this country, there are workers employed at companies who are paying them starvation wages. And I am, as a U.S. Senator, I am embarrassed to tell you that the federal minimum wage remains $7.25 an hour. We have got to raise that federal minimum wage to a living wage of at least $17 an hour so that nobody in America works for starvation wages. We need trade policies that benefit workers and not just large corporations. I am sick and tired of seeing companies shut down in America and run to China, run to Mexico, run to other low-wage countries. We need policies that say, guess what? You ain't going there, you're staying here, and pay your workers here a living wage. And I want to thank Sean Fain and the UAW for raising another issue that I think has not gotten the attention that it deserves, and that is we live in a nation today when half of older workers have no retirement savings. A quarter of older people in America are trying to get by on $15,000 a year. Half less than $30,000 a year. I don't know how you do that. What we must do in that reality is not what the Republicans want, which is to cut Social Security in one way or another, raise the retirement age, cut benefits, whatever it may be. What we have got to do is expand Social Security benefits by lifting the cap on taxable income. So right now you have the absurd situation that a millionaire is paying the same amount into Social Security as somebody makes about $165,000. If you lift that cap, you tax all of that income, we can substantially raise Social Security benefits and make Social Security solvent for the next 75 years. Sounds good to me. And I'll tell you something else that we should do, and the UAW is beginning to put it on the table when they negotiate. We should bring back defined benefit pension plans. Now, younger people may not even know what a defined benefit pension plan is, because they have been so wiped out all over America. But it used to be the case that if you worked at a large company, you not only got health care and other benefits, you got a pension. And you actually knew what that pension was. It was guaranteed to you. I think at a time when so many elderly people are living in great fear of their latter years. The latter years should be years of joy. You know, you work your whole life, retire, enjoy it. But many people are living in fear. So we need to bring back defined benefit pension plans. And let me say a word on another issue which is enormously important and is really a key factor, I think, in this campaign. Donald Trump believes, and you know, the great scientist that he is, having a PhD in science and having studied this stuff for years, he has concluded that climate change is a hoax created by China. Now, people who hold that point of view are not only absurdly dumb in facing the reality, but it is extremely dangerous. All right, I don't have to tell you because you're seeing it right now. I just left Washington. It's going to be 100 degrees there today. In India recently, it was like 125 degrees. You saw what's going on in Saudi Arabia. 1,000 people died because of the heat. If we do not get our act together as a world, it's not an American issue, it's not a Chinese issue, it's a world issue. What you're going to see is warmer and warmer months and years and days. You're going to see more drought, more flooding, more extreme weather disturbances. In my state of Vermont last summer, you know, you get scared, you worry that it's going to happen again. We had a terrible flood that did enormous harm. Hundreds of people lost their homes, businesses, small businesses wiped out ours. Our state capital, Montpelier, still has not recovered from that flood. That's what's going on all over this country and all over the world. So when people go around telling you, oh, climate change is a hoax, they are literally endangering the well-being of our kids and future generations. So what we have got to do is work with countries all over the world. We can't do it alone. Work with countries all over the world in transforming our energy system. And we are making some progress. And there's some good news out there. I got a bill passed. I mean, it's just one part of a whole lot of other stuff that would help working class families afford solar panels on their rooftops. And you know what that's about? That's a step forward. We've got some, my wife and I have solar panels on our rooftops. You know what we paid in our electric bill last month? Not only did we not pay anything, we got a credit of $100. All right. So when you put panels on your rooftop, you see a significant reduction, 80–90% in your electric bill. I think that's true nationally. And when we do that, we protect the climate, we save people money on their electric bills, and we create a lot of jobs. And that's the kind of stuff we should be doing all over this country. And when we talk about what we should be doing, we should understand that education, from childcare to graduate school, is a right that should be available to all of our people without the need to go deeply into debt. And again, take a step back and think about it. How do we compete globally in a very competitive global economy if we don't have a well-educated workforce, right? We don't do it. And yet, I talk to people. Do you know how much when a lot of young people graduate medical school, for example, do you know what the debt is? Anyone know? Yeah, well, 400,000 or 500,000. We desperately need more doctors. And yet they leave school deeply in debt. We need more dentists. They leave school deeply in debt. I talk to nurse practitioners in Vermont. They're leaving school deeply in debt. But it's not just college and graduate school. You got a lot of young people who are not academically inclined who want to go out and work with their hands, and we desperately need them. We need plumbers. We need electricians. We need welders. We need, in my state, we brought billions of dollars in to Vermont, and it's true here as well in Wisconsin. Tammy Baldwin did a great job. Put money in here I agree, to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. You know what, in Vermont? We don't have enough workers, skilled workers to do the work. So what we need to do is to make sure that young people have the training they need. You don't want to go to college? Fine. You can make more money being a plumber today or an electrician than being a college graduate. Give them the training to do that. We desperately need those workers. And there's another issue. Everything is tied into everything else. And that is, you're not going to have the economy that we need that works for working people so long as we continue to have a corrupt campaign finance political system. So right now, as a result of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, and this is the simple truth, billionaires, and we got a growing number of billionaires, are able to put as much money as they want into a super PAC. And that super PAC then puts ads on television, etc., to defeat candidates they don't like and support candidates they do like. You know, when I grew up as a kid, what I understood democracy to be about is one person, one vote. If you disagree with me, that's fine. That's good. That's really, I really do love that stuff. That's democracy. We've got to sit down, talk about the issues, work it out. Democracy is not about billionaires buying elections. That's oligarchy. That's not democracy. So we have got to overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision and, in my view, move to public funding of elections. You want to run for office and you're a working class person, you want to beg rich people for funds, you should be able to have the financial support you need to run a strong campaign. So bottom line is, we are living in a moment, a pivotal moment in my view, in American history. You know, our country since its inception has gone through a whole lot. I mean, I think back, and I really do, about the guys who wrote the Declaration of Independence and fought in the Revolutionary War. You know, that was a big deal. They put their lives on the line to break away from British monarchy, and some of them died. And if you look at the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, man, hundreds of years later, they remain pretty good documents. And they were brave, and that was a pivotal moment in American history. And I think about the Civil War period. God, you go around the state of Vermont, you go to these small towns, and they have these monuments there of young people by the dozens who died in the Civil War fighting to end slavery in this country. 600,000 people died in the Civil War. That was a pivotal moment in American history. And I think about the Great Depression that our grandparents went through, where 25% of America was unemployed. And the pivotal moment was FDR getting elected in 1932 and transforming what the role of the federal government was. And what he said, the federal government is going to work for working people. And if the ruling class, that was his words, if they hate me, so be it. I welcome their hatred. And now that was then, and we are here now. And this is, again, I think, a pivotal moment. Climate change is existential. We've got to get a handle on it or not. Are we going to remain a democracy of one person, one vote? or an oligarchy with billionaires by election? Are women going to be able to control their own bodies? Or are you going to have state legislatures telling them what they can or cannot do? So there are a lot of issues out there. We got a lot of issues. And you're right, we got a war going on right now in Gaza, which breaks my heart. And right now, the United States government is funding a right-wing extremist Israeli government led by Netanyahu, who have not only displaced 1.8 million people, 75% of the population, not only destroyed over 60% of the housing, not only destroyed the healthcare facilities throughout Gaza, not only bombed every single university, but now they have created the conditions where children are dealing with malnutrition and starvation. Now, my view is that, what Hamas did on October 7th was an atrocity. It was a war crime, and Israel, like any other government, had the right to respond to Hamas, a terrorist organization. But they did not have the right to go to war against the entire Palestinian people. And that is what's happening. And then you got the war in Ukraine, and you got a lot of stuff that's going on. So I guess I conclude by saying this. It is very easy with all of these problems to say, to hell with it all, I'm going to stick my head in the sand, I'm going to turn off the TV, I'm not going to vote, I'm not going to get involved in politics. We can't do that, not just for ourselves, but I've got 4 kids and 7 grandchildren. All of you have kids and grandchildren. We have got to be involved in the political process. We've got to stand up to corporate interest. We have got to address the crisis of climate change. We have to create a world in which people are not killing each other all over the place. We can do it. So I just want to thank all of you, not only for what you do every day, and those of you who are in the trade union movement for what you are doing, but to say that now is not a time to turn away from the realities that we face, no matter how difficult that they are. That would be a disservice to future generations. We can do it. The country before has faced monumental moments in our history. We've come together and we have done what had to be done. So I'm begging of you now, in this particular moment, let us not turn to despair. It's not an option. Let's stand up, let's fight, and let us create the kind of country you and I know that we can become. Thank you all very much.